This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A dramatic showdown on Capitol Hill has led to the historic ousting of U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and hurtled Washington into chaos. How did McCarthy lose the gavel? Why is the GOP in civil war? What does the McCarthy saga reveal about U.S. politics?
Kevin McCarthy's speakership has come to a crashing end as he became the first and only speaker in U.S. history to be ousted by a vote of the House. The stunning coup was sparked by weeks of chaos and fighting within the GOP as a rogue group of hardline conservatives led by Florida Republican Representative Matt Gaetz broke ranks and sided with the Democrats to end McCarthy's reign. And this is how it all unraveled.
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
Kevin McCarthy's run as Speaker was short-lived and anything but sweet.
What's next?
Congressman, will you resign?
He was taken down from both sides of the aisle as 8 Republicans joined all Democrats in an unprecedented vote that stripped him of his seat. It was a historic humiliation for McCarthy. The first speaker ever to be ousted by a House vote.
Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. Resolved that the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives is hereby declared to be vacant.
The mastermind behind the plot was Florida's firebrand Republican Matt Gaetz, who led the charge of the far-right rebels. They accused McCarthy of being a spineless sellout who caved in to the Democrats' demands.
For me, it's not ideological. It's about having a leader in our nation who will tell the truth, who you can trust. And that's what the American people deserve. If he were to continue to be Speaker, there would be chaos that would continue because he's not been honest with either party.
We passed by overwhelming numbers the ability to keep government open for the next 6 weeks.
McCarthy had sealed his fate when he decided to pass a short-term funding bill with Democratic support the week prior, averting a government shutdown but angering conservatives who demanded fiscal austerity and border security.
All you want, who have hollowed out this town and have borrowed against the future of our future generations.
I think we're in a really bad place for how we're going to run.
Well, he said he wanted to be the adult in the room when he sort of changed tack on the budget negotiations. But the olive branch he extended to Democrats, it wasn't enough to convince them that he was going to be a reliable negotiator in the future. Basically, he knew there was a risk. He knew his right flank would be offended. So it's even possible that he took the risk, knowing that it would be better to find out if they were going to do it now, or instead of waiting to see, instead of having the right flank hold that over him throughout, for years.
As the rebels plotted his downfall, McCarthy feigned confidence, tweeting 3 defiant words, "Bring it on." But his bravado was short-lived, as he soon faced the harsh reality of his crumbling support, losing his speakership in a stunning humiliation.
Look, you all know Matt Gaetz. You know it was personal. It had nothing to do about spending. It had nothing to do about everything he accused somebody of he was doing. It all was about getting attention from you.
McCarthy's abrupt downfall has intensified the internal schism within the Republican Party, ushering in a wave of chaos.
And I'm going to be extraordinarily proud of the person I fought for.
Pass the bills that need passed, do the oversight work that needs to be done, and stop the inevitable omnibus that comes from the United States Senate.
Nobody is going to try it again.
Time has expired.
This institution will fail. Text messages saying, hey, give me money. Oh, look at that. Oh, look, give me money. I filed the motion to vacate.
A faction of Republicans is brewing punitive measures against the hardliners who voted in favor of his ouster. It's a humiliation to McCarthy, to the Republicans and Democrats alike, and to U.S. political affairs. It's a revelation of the true nature of U.S. politics. Kevin McCarthy's removal from power may look shocking to many, but McCarthy's fall from grace was not a sudden twist of fate, but rather a slow-motion train wreck. And before we delve into the far-reaching implications of McCarthy's downfall, we first take a closer look at who he is and how his character and personality affect his political career.
A speaker has not been elected. A speaker has not been elected.
Despite being the incumbent House Republican leader, McCarthy had failed to rally enough support for his speakership bid after a contentious 4 days and 14 failed ballots. The last time the House failed to elect a speaker on the first ballot was a century ago. To secure his speakership bid, he made a deal with the House Freedom Caucus, a faction of ultra-conservative lawmakers who had often challenged the GOP establishment. That agreement, however, would plant the seeds of his own demise.
Kevin McCarthy gave away everything, including his dignity in this process, gave it away to this fringe group of people who tried to overturn our election, who cheered on the insurrectionists, who represent the most intolerant wing of the Republican Party.
Many people will say it's a fool's wager, mainly because this House has become so unpredictable. And one of the reasons why it took so many votes, and one of the reasons why he was on such a string, is among the concessions he made to get that hardline faction that we were talking about to vote for him. And among those concessions were, okay, guys, we're going to change the rules. If you don't like what I'm going to do, then you have the option to remove me. Is that enough to get your vote? You can pull my string at any time and I'll fall through the trap door. So certainly he set himself up for failure, but it certainly is unprecedented for a governing party or a ruling body to get rid of its own leader and do it in such a small amount of time with so many things at stake.
One of the concessions that McCarthy made to the Freedom Caucus was to agree to a rule change that would allow any member of the House to call for a vote to oust him from his throne. This rule change was proposed by Gates, who wasted no time in pulling the trigger.
Chaos is Speaker McCarthy. Chaos is somebody who we cannot trust with their word. The one thing that the White House, House Democrats, and many of us on the conservative side of the Republican caucus would argue is that
the scathing words from Gates for his former Republican leader reflect not only his view, but also a common sentiment of distrust in McCarthy's character among colleagues. According to an opinion piece by The Hill, McCarthy's detractors think he would do whatever it takes to advance his career, even at the expense of his political philosophy. He's widely seen as a political opportunist. And according to an article published on The New Republic, a Washington, D.C.-based political magazine, colleagues say the deputy whip avoids alienating different factions by not aligning himself too closely with any of them. He's also referred to as a Republican Machiavelli. But the most damning assessment of Kevin McCarthy as a person comes from the one man who should know him best, former House Representative Bill Thomas, who was McCarthy's boss and mentor for more than a decade. He blasted the House GOP leader in remarks to The New Yorker and accused McCarthy of being a liar who could not be trusted. Kevin basically is whatever you want him to be. He lies. He will change the lie if necessary. How can anyone trust his word? Thomas was quoted as saying. The former mentor has slammed McCarthy's cozying up to Donald Trump, a relationship that has been nothing short of a roller coaster ride, riddled with both loyalty and friction.
Were the president's tweets that said "go back" racist? Yes or no?
No, I do not believe that. I believe this is about ideology.
Ideology? Many believe that McCarthy is a man without principles or beliefs.
A Republican like McCarthy may or may not be an ideologue, may or may not be a principled conservative or even a fan of Donald Trump, and I don't think he's an ideologue, principled, or a true blue Trumpist, but his pathway to power, and power is what he has long coveted, was through a Republican Party with a base that has been dominated by Trump for more than 6 years and that has been moving rightward for more than 40.
To the deep dismay of his former mentor, McCarthy stood for Trump and against the democratic institution he so often professed to uphold. And then came one of the most shocking events in recent U.S. history.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
In that week between the mob crime on January 6th and the vote to impeach the president on the 13th, a number of major corporate entities, and you just can't believe all of the big corporations said they weren't giving money to Republicans anymore. So the floor listened to Kevin McCarthy talk about coming together. He said that actually Trump had lost. What happened to the January 6th argument about massive fraud?
McCarthy could not afford to lose either of his trump cards, the money or Donald Trump. So he started to vacillate like the pendulum on a clock. Fearing the loss of massive sums of political donations, McCarthy initially distanced himself from Trump after the deadly riot.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters.
The New York Times reported that Mr. McCarthy told his leadership team that he would call Mr. Trump and urge him to quit. McCarthy vehemently denied the reporting, calling it totally false and wrong. McCarthy was ready to adapt to the needs of the situation, much like a chameleon. Little did he know, his chameleon nature would soon be unmasked for all to see.
And the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign.
The recording was released by the New York Times, but that statement was put out before the release of the tape.
Kevin McCarthy was now publicly exposed as a liar. His hypocrisy drew the ire of both sides of the political aisle.
And right there, you saw Kevin McCarthy lying like a dead dog.
Kevin McCarthy is a liar and a traitor. This is outrageous.
Besieged by enemies on both sides, McCarthy had few allies left to stand by him or back him up. His speakership was a lost cause from the get-go, as he tried to straddle between two incompatible forces, the moderates and the radicals. He ended up disappointing both and making enemies of both.
It demonstrated that McCarthy's inexhaustible ambition to become Speaker was willing to endure tremendous insults and profound compromises that were neither good for the functioning of the institution of the House of Representatives or American governance as a whole. Furthermore, as a matter of personal character, it suggests a craven egocentrism coupled with a sociopathic concept of dignity. Now, this is a strange contradiction if you think about it, but it's not uncommon, arguably, in the U.S. today.
Politics in America is not about principle, all right? They talk about principle, but really it is about just saying whatever you need to say at the moment to get votes. And it's a process unto itself. Why do you think Americans have such a low opinion of their own government? Because they see on a day-to-day basis, these people are completely out of touch with the American realities.
A dramatic showdown on Capitol Hill has led to the historic ousting of U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and hurtled Washington into chaos. How did McCarthy lose the gavel? Why is the GOP in civil war? What does the McCarthy saga reveal about U.S. politics?
They were the king makers and the king breakers, the ultra-far-right faction that propelled Kevin McCarthy to the House speakership and then brought him down in a stunning coup. But their role in American politics is not limited to this one episode. They're part of a larger phenomenon, the rise and growing influence of radical conservative forces in America. We now take a closer look at how the far right has hijacked the American political agenda. They call themselves patriots, but their actions speak otherwise. They stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, in an attempt to overturn the election results and keep Donald Trump in power.
President Donald J. Trump! And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
They marched on the Lincoln Memorial in December 2021 with shields and flags, claiming to defend their white supremacist vision of America. They are the far right, a diverse and dangerous group of individuals that includes white nationalists, neo-Nazis, militias, conspiracy theorists, and radicalized Trump supporters. And they have found allies and enablers among some of the most prominent figures in the Republican Party.
I know a ton of white people that are as lazy and sorry and probably worse than black people I know.
Meet Marjorie Taylor Greene, an American far-right politician who holds a seat in the U.S. Congress. Greene is a believer of conspiracy theories that deny the reality of mass shootings and claim they're staged by the government to take away people's guns. She also advocates for a national divorce that would split the country along ideological lines.
January 6, 2020, I was the one that started the revolution in regards to accountability in elections.
That's Paul Gosar, a Republican congressman from Arizona, who was the first House member to be censured in a decade in 2021 after he tweeted an enemy clip of himself murdering Democratic House Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and attacking President Biden. But that's far from all. He also spoke at an event hosted by Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist and Holocaust denier, and spread misinformation about COVID-19. These are just some examples of how some Republican politicians have aligned themselves with a far-right agenda. They're not just fringe figures. They're the new face of the Republican Party.
Needless to say, none of them are people who've ever run anything politically very seriously. These are not ex-governors or ex-city mayors. These are people, ideologues, who have come out of the bushes, literally, with their ideology, following on the coattails of Donald Trump, and basically trying to say that the United States is in a bad situation and that they're the only ones who can save it, although they represent a very, very small minority of the United States.
Trump's presidency was a clarion call to the right-wing extremists in the U.S. who emerged from the shadows, parading their radicalism like a badge of honor. Their refusal to bend or collaborate stood in stark contrast to the moderates, who at least tried to navigate the murky waters of compromise. The ousting of McCarthy, orchestrated by 8 renegade Republicans, served as a chilling testament to this. They served only their narrow interests, effectively seizing control of American politics.
Is hereby declared vacant.
To whose benefit? People have called you a narcissist. People say that is to your benefit alone. Is it to the benefit of you and to Donald Trump?
It's the benefit of this country that we have a better Speaker of the House than Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy accuses Gaetz and his allies of undermining party unity. On the other hand, Gaetz justifies his attempt to oust McCarthy by pointing out McCarthy's support for the Democrats' spending bill, which he perceives as a deviation from Republican principles. However, without this bill, a government shutdown would have ensued, causing greater chaos in the U.S. Some analysts suggest that Gaetz and his allies aim to use spending cuts to gain leverage within the party, prioritizing personal agendas over public interest.
Well, the far right, the Freedom Caucus has made it clear that they will not sign on to any kind of debt deal. They don't want to recognize reality. What they want is for the government to establish cuts in future programs in order for them to go ahead with an increase in the ceiling so that they can then claim that they are reining in a profligate and irresponsible, financially irresponsible government. This is their whole ideology that government is evil.
The 8 that voted him out, you saw a faction of the Republican Party that cares about themselves and their own agenda than what is most important, the American people's agenda.
According to the Anti-Defamation League, a nonprofit that monitors hate groups, over 100 far-right candidates ran for office under the GOP banner in 2022. Many of them had ties to white supremacists, anti-government extremists, and members of the far-right Proud Boys. They are challenging the mainstream Republicans who are not radical enough for their taste, and they have an audience. A shocking 30% of Republicans say the violence may be necessary to save America, according to a poll by the Public Religion Research Institute. This came as the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riots uncovered the deep involvement of Republican lawmakers and Trump aides in the deadly attack. The evidence is clear. The Republican Party has become a vehicle for far-right extremism that undermines the very fabric of democracy.
There's a lot of reasons why. There's been some structural changes, commonly called gerrymandering. But there is also the reality that Trump, in his 2016 campaign, starting in 2015, he opened up the possibility of saying a lot of things that politicians couldn't say, and he didn't just open up that possibility, he won with that.
We will make America great again.
And when Trump's sort of rhetoric became a winner, became an election winner, a lot of people in politics reconsidered. And the question is whether this sort of rhetoric, whether it would have a rise and fall, or whether, as its proponents would wish, it will have a rise and become the mainstream.
A dramatic showdown on Capitol Hill has led to the historic ousting of U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and hurtled Washington into chaos. How did McCarthy lose the gavel? Why is the GOP in civil war? What does the McCarthy saga reveal about U.S. politics?
Kevin McCarthy tried to play both sides of the fence. He cut deals with the far-right wing of his own Republican Party to clinch his role as the House leader. But he soon discovered that he had made a pact with the devil. McCarthy became the victim of his deals to win speakership and of U.S. politics he himself is part of. His predicament exposed not only the deepening crisis within the Republican Party, but also American politics in general.
More than anything, we need to change the poisonous atmosphere in Washington. We have strong disagreements, but we need to stop seeing each other as enemies.
President Joe Biden's plea for unity and civility comes at a time when the U.S. is facing a deep and bitter polarization that threatens its democracy and stability. But can U.S. politicians really change the poisonous atmosphere in Washington?
Frankly, it has become a toxic environment. It's hard to think of a time when the two sides disliked each other so much. There have always been differences in opinion, but there is a real dislike. Honestly, I think most people in Washington think if that is to be shed, another election has to happen. The 2024 election. But right now, with such a closely divided Congress in both houses, it is contagious to the rest of the city where both sides are sort of dug up in foxholes and there's very little negotiation going on.
The turbulent election process and the recent ouster of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is a stark example of just that. McCarthy made steep concessions with the far-right wing of his party in order to win speakership, precisely because of the razor-thin majority that his party has in the House, a reflection of the widening chasm between the left and right. America is a country of contrasts, where freedom and democracy are touted as cherished values, while at the same time polarization and conflict are undeniably evident.
Republicans in Congress are spreading conspiracy theories, denying reality, and poisoning the well of our democracy.
The Democrats have to now decide whether they will continue defrauding the public with ridiculous bullshit.
According to a report by the Pew Research Center, America is exceptional in the nature of its political divide, with Democrats and Republicans disagreeing on a wide range of issues, from the economy to racial justice, climate change, law enforcement, international engagement, and a long list of other issues. According to the report, the 2020 presidential election exposed the deep and bitter divisions that run through the heart of America. Biden and Trump supporters see each other as enemies, not just rivals.
Every vote counted. Voter fraud.
We won. We won.
Cheaters. Cheaters.
They disagree on more than just politics and policies. They disagree on what it means to be an American. A month before the election, about 8 out of 10 voters in both camps said their differences with the other side were about core American values, and almost 9 out of 10 fear that if the other side won, it would cause lasting damage to the country. And this is the grim and chaotic reality behind the numbers. On the streets of America, where hatred and disorder prevail. The violent clashes in the streets of American cities and towns between the left and right mirror the escalating hostility of the political battles between Republicans and Democrats in Washington. A majority of Republicans perceive the federal criminal charges against Donald Trump as being politically driven. Conversely, Biden supporters are of the view that any indictments against Hunter Biden over federal firearms charges are politically motivated.
Chem Logger Dove.
Yes! There's a growing divide even within the Republican and Democratic parties.
Is hereby declared vacant.
The ouster of McCarthy is a vivid example where he was betrayed by a small group of far-right rebels within his own party, who in turn accused him of betraying the Republican Party. Ironically, none of the Democrats in the House showed any gratitude to McCarthy, who had helped pass the spending bill, which avoided a government shutdown. The Democrats didn't start the fire, but fanned the flames and loved to see the Republican Party in chaos. This is American politics at play. American leaders love to tout the U.S. political system and democracy.
America's winning, and I've said 1,000 times.
Our extraordinary democracy, which continues to make us the envy of the world.
But ordinary Americans view otherwise.
I don't feel represented or heard.
Give me the choice instead of just giving me these two steaming piles of waste on which to decide from.
The reality is, America is a nation divided. But what are the forces that drive this deep schism? Many countries struggle with the challenges of diverse cultural, historical, and regional identities.
One more! Not one more!
But America has a distinctive feature that sets it apart. A two-party system that forces a wide range of issues into polarized camps.
We will abolish abortion!
And it's becoming increasingly difficult to reach a bipartisan consensus on any issue. A recent Gallup poll showed that support for a third major U.S. political party has gone up to 63%.
There's this idea that two very different visions for the country are competing. Until one of those visions sort of establishes political dominance, it's very hard to see that this sense of polarization will go away.
The U.S. government has lost the faith of the American people. Public trust has plummeted to one of the lowest levels in history. Only 16% of Americans believe that Washington can do what is right, either always or most of the time. This is a shocking indictment of the state of democracy in the nation.
We know that the framers of the U.S. Constitution purposely designed the House to be the most democratic, but also the least effective branch of government. Consequently, the House has often been fractious, often been the home of political theater and perpetual campaigning for re-election, since representatives have terms that are only 2 years in length. However, given the deeper splits in American society today, given the systemic challenges and the need for deep reforms, the House is failing and has been failing for many years to play a constructive role in governance. And this has made American problems worse. McCarthy's Congress, unfortunately, exemplifies this trend.
That's the state of play in America. It's what's wrong with the system. Nobody expects their politicians to tell the truth anymore. Yet they're always disappointed when these politicians don't deliver.
Kevin McCarthy's ouster is more than a personal defeat. It's a reflection of America's fractured and toxic politics and failing institutions. The shockwaves from McCarthy's removal are set to ripple through the future of American political landscape. And many argue that it's the American people who are left grappling with heightened uncertainty, a paralyzing gridlock in Washington, and their voices drown out as their elected officials fail to address their pressing needs and concerns. In the midst of this turmoil, people are asking, how long will the U.S. be plagued with toxic bipartisan politics and political discord?